Hello, everyone, and welcome to Team Ningen Gaming. Here we believe in... goodness gracious, I've already lost it. So here we believe in connecting a name and a face to the product that you buy and making it so that the vast majority of consumers can feel an emotional connection with the people that made the product that they have. Today, this is my co-host for the day, Faith. I'm Matt. And today we are joined by Ed and Nick, who made Breakpoint. Say hi, guys.
Hello.
Hey.
Awesome. So Breakpoint went live Thursday this week, and today we're going to get to know Ed and Nick. We're going to ask them some questions, and we're going to get started. So, Ed, tell us your life story. I want to know... Yeah, your whole life story. I want to know it all.
The tender age of 0 born in Ohio. No, I'm sure you don't want to know that part necessarily.
Where did you grow up? Tell us about yourself.
I grew up in Pennsylvania for most of my life. Well, before that, I'd moved around a lot, but like a lot of my earlier memories are back in Pennsylvania, where my dad was a computer science professor and my mom was I'm actually still not sure exactly, like. IT for nurses, I believe.
Okay.
So yeah, grew up there for a while, just played around in the woods, so on. But first exposure to game development was that I took a class under my dad in middle school, because as a computer science professor, he wanted to encourage me to get into a lucrative career, and he saw my interest in game development and was like, well, let's take advantage of that and get him into computer science.
Nice.
Right? So took that class, been hooked on programming ever since. Did a lot of just side projects while I was in high school, college, all the way up till now. And Breakpoint is Nick and I's first commercial release, and really excited for it to be out there.
Sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry. I lost connection for that last second. I was messing with this right here.
Good.
But okay, cool. Sorry.
No,
Any comments?
You're good. No.
Comments. Say them because I don't have it. Sorry. 1 second. Let me grab a pair of headphones for this because I can't hear what's going through the YouTube.
Okay. All good.
Gotcha.
Okay. Oh no. Okay. So whenever you say you took classes in high school and college, right?
Yep. Yeah. So.
In high school, how many classes did you have to take? Was there just one class, or was there multiple you had to take?
Yeah. So I think the first class I took was right at the beginning of high school under my dad, and then just took I think one other computer science class because essentially I'd already decided let me go to university for computer science. So basically those classes were just to boost my chances to getting into a university, and then the real stuff was in college.
Okay.
But again, that was more like a computer science, a traditional programming curriculum than a game development one. Because, for my dad at least, it was never about game development. For me, it was always about game development. But,
That's awesome.
Awesome. Well, I asked because I know at my high school we had web design, we had programming, and there was one
Gotcha.
other one as well. So I didn't know if it was the same thing at your high school or if it was different or.
Oh, so actually, I was taking university classes. Those two classes I had mentioned. In my high school classes, I think I took one programming class, but that was all our high school offered.
Oh, okay.
So Ed, clearly since a young age you loved the idea of game development. You love yeah. You were already drawn to it. What about game development makes you want to, what about video games makes you want to, what brought you to this point to making games? What emotionally is there?
I get this question a lot, and I never am able to pinpoint exactly what it was, to be honest. I just know from a very early age, I was just man, these are really awesome. I want to do this exactly. The one video game I can pinpoint to that was really influential back then, at least, was Morrowind, because it was a game I kept coming back to again and again. I tell this story a lot that as a kid I had no freaking idea what was going on in that game. It's so impenetrable. But I would just like come back to it every few months, be like, oh, like let me see if I can get a little bit further, and then like I would learn how to level up because the level up system in that game is weird, and then I would like to do another thing, and then another thing, and then eventually, later in life, I finally figured it out, and I was like, oh my god, like this is crazy. This is a really good game. So yeah, maybe it was just that experience of like oh, it's this unfolding process that video games can do that made me really interested.
That's really cool. Nice. So what did you ever mess around in the command prompt? Because that was like my first introduction to stuff like that in video games.
Yeah. So my very first game was I can still remember it, even though it's gone forever. I think it's on some old computer that I'm sure it's been wiped. My first game was a game called Farms and Food, and it was a game where you got seeds, and then and this is all in the command prompt, which is so it's all in the command prompt. It says like, oh, you have 4 seeds. Like how many seeds do you want to plant? Obviously, you want to plant all of them every time. It asks you anyway, right? And then you plant 4 seeds, and then it grows like 4 trees, which drops 8 seeds, and then you cover the entire planet in farms, and that's like, how you win the game.
Okay. That's actually pretty interesting. I don't think I've ever heard of that. That's cool. I was actually thinking specifically command prompt in Morrowind, or if you ever messed around with that.
I see. Gotcha. No, of course I did that too. Yeah, I mean, visited the dev room and all of that in Morrowind. Yeah, of course.
Nice, very cool. Those were some of the best times of my my childhood. Making a bunch of NPCs follow you around and force them all to hop and like start fighting each other. Good stuff. Very cool. So, Nick, tell us about yourself. Where did you grow up?
Sure. I grew up in Bremerton, which is across the water from Seattle, and then moved to Seattle later on in life. But yeah. As far as it's related to games, I grew up playing a lot of console games. I played, my brother and I shared a lot of passion for Nintendo. It wasn't even ours, it was our sister's Nintendo, and it was gotten for her birthday, and we were the ones that gravitated towards it, and we ended up playing the hell out of it, and we played Duck Hunt and Mario, Zelda, all of the classics, a lot of Mega Man. So after a while, we started growing up and played. We actually skipped the SNES, not because we had any choice, but because it was an expensive machine that you couldn't justify getting at a tender age of young not age. And we got into the N64 though, and continued that classic passion for Nintendo. To a kind of boneheaded degree, but we loved it. And then only probably later on in life did I start to gravitate towards PC, just because a lot of my work started getting involved with PC, and I was just at the computer all the time. It was just easier to play games on the PC, and I don't really have that difficulty separating my work and my leisure space. It's just sort of like a different brain container for me. So I just started gravitating a lot towards PC gaming, started to explore a lot more PC gaming, kind of, roots of PC gaming, and then also just like the fun that you can have with PC gaming, because I had not played it's probably a good reason why I suck at RTSs, because I just never trained my hands to do that kind of APL.
Right.
More of a Smash guy myself.
You never played StarCraft on the N64?
I know, right?
That did exist.
Yeah, totally.
I was not aware.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically, it just kind of naturally gravitated towards wanting to make games at an early age. I was in a very supportive support network. Despite the fact that my family never really knew the second thing about games, they just wanted to support us. They thought that what we liked was worth our time. My brother and I wanted to pursue game development. He's still working at Microsoft, and he was more of a programmer-oriented person. I was more of an artistic-oriented person. So as I grew up, I sort of just oriented my skills towards design and art. And as I was growing up, and I worked at Microsoft earlier and then Big Fish Games a little later, but I realized I was not really having a lot of the conversations I was having about games I realized were from sort of a consumer-oriented perspective. I liked it, but what made it difficult to have those conversations was I realized that the conversations I really wanted to have was more from a development-oriented perspective. I wanted to talk about stuff that was behind the curtains. I wanted to talk about the design process. I wanted to talk about a lot of the complicated stuff that wasn't just playing games and having fun with them. I wanted to see what made it tick. And I realized I wasn't having a lot of those conversations, even though I was working at tech-oriented companies. And so I decided, let's just really explore my boundaries, explore my limits, and I decided to go on Meetup.
Right.
Just go to Seattle Indies Meetup. Even though I'm not really the kind of like explore social things kind of person. I was like, I really have to do this if I'm going to find people who are more like the kind of people I really want to talk with, and just at least explore, seeing if there's anybody out there who will have conversations with me in a way that is probably a little bit more stimulating or invigorating, in a way that's more development oriented. And so that's where I actually met Ed. He was one of the first people I met at Seattle Indies, and he and I just kind of hit it off, and we started working together on just like a variety of small projects. While I was working with him, I was just working with a bunch of other people, but Ed was one of the people I stuck it through with, and we ended up getting together to essentially form our company and then make Breakpoint.
That's really cool.
Okay.
Awesome, Nick. Nice. I noticed you saying, that you wanted to talk to people that had that same kind of mindset and had that same kind of interest. Like, that actually speaks to things about like how we all kind of gravitate toward where we feel like we belong, and we need to connect with people that we have mutual interests,
Right.
have mutual interests, and we can connect with one another. So that speaks words and words. That's really cool, because that seems like you actually have that need to connect with the people that you're working with as well, quite a bit. And I'm guessing you and Ed had a deeper connection probably than the rest of the other team. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd say so. It's a combination of a lot of things. I'm friends with a lot of the folks there, and we're all really close. I think Ed and I, one of the reasons why we gravitate towards each other is because we kind of share some of the same work mentality, and we also agree about at least some of the focuses in game development and game design. We
Certainly not all, but definitely enough.
it's healthy, obviously, not to have
Right.
exactly the same kind of interests, and while we may not see eye to eye on certain things, the important part is that you can resolve those differences in a healthy way in order to make essentially what is a better product. It's kind of important actually to disagree on certain things, so that you can just see another side.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. So now tell me about that. I'm actually kind of curious now. What are some of the things you guys disagree on? That won't get too heated, will it?
I don't think so, at least.
I don't think so.
Yeah.
I think in some of our past projects, I think we just, because of our different tastes in like some of our other hobbies, like Ed reads a lot more, and the things that I read are probably just more like, I generally just keep abreast of the industry, so I'm just like reading bloggers or aggregate sites for news about games or companies that are in games. And apart from that kind of reading, I'm usually just like playing a smattering of all different types of games. I wouldn't say that we necessarily disagree on, like, say for example, Dark Souls. Like he really likes it. I respect it, and when I'm not respecting it, I hate it a lot. But I did because it was important for me to understand what was happening in Dark Souls, because it was just a huge cornerstone of a lot of conversations. And so from a design perspective, you just have to understand what's going on with kind of that gaming cultural zeitgeist. And if you don't, it's not like you're going to be missing out necessarily, because everybody can be making games from all different types of perspectives. But for me, it was important to understand, because games are like a vocabulary to me, and if I say it's like Dark Souls, a lot of people understand that.
Yeah.
So
It's actually become a meme, in fact.
yeah, exactly. It's the Dark Souls of whatever. Like
Yeah.
that is just too frequent of a thing to say for people. So in order to understand what that means, or to understand not even just the memes, but just the references that people make, and maybe why people are really gravitating towards it and what it does really well. And it does a lot well, I'll have to say that. I respect it a lot for a lot of the things that it does well, particularly its lore building, its world building, its atmosphere. It's really good at those sorts of things, even as, you know, I'm a little bit more drawn towards more faster paced, combat oriented types of engagements. I understand that some people will argue like, it's a very combat oriented game. Yes, it's slow and deliberate, and that's true, but it's not necessarily the most complicated. And I think that's where some people, you know, will disagree with me, sorry. I don't know whether or not Ed necessarily disagrees. We might disagree in terms of taste, but we won't necessarily disagree because of, if we really talk about the fundamentals of what that game is broken apart into, we'll disagree on just mostly taste. It's like when we were working on like a game, one of the games before Breakpoint, we had several projects that we just kind of done that were smaller scale. And we were like, we had to do writing, God forbid, and neither of us are writers, so it was like when both of you have to do something neither of you are good at, neither of you are probably very good at judging it either. So we were like, I was trying to write stuff and he was trying to write, and we were like, no, I don't like this part, and he's like, he's gonna write this. I'm like, I don't like this punctuation here or this. It's like, why did you put this weird comedy part? And I'm like, I don't know,
just because it felt right.
Yeah, it's like we're like trying to go after different things, and even as we internally recognize it's not necessarily the best way to do it, it's the only way we know how, and that's where some of the disagreements might arise. Because our instincts, even as we know they're not like the best, we still have to do them because they're the only thing we know.
Right. So, Ed, do you want to expound on that a little? He seemed to have some things that he said about where you guys would have disagreements. How do you feel about that? How do you feel about those areas he's mentioning taste-wise, or
No, I think it's pretty accurate. Like for example, I'm not a Dark Souls super fan, but definitely like I enjoyed it more than Nick did. I can say that for sure. And yeah, there's certain elements in Dark Souls that I just, you know, tend to like more than Nick does. So sometimes I'm like, oh, like maybe we should do this thing, and you know, we just talk about like, oh, should we do it? You know, both of us have just varying degrees of like, oh, maybe it's a good idea, maybe not. And then we just sort of hash it out. And I think back to what Nick was saying, it's really that hashing out process that I think makes us a good team. That we can do that is really important.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, next. I actually have a list here. I didn't have that last time. I have one friend that said that he was going to make fun of me if I was reading off of the list, and I said, well, that's just too bad. I guess you're going to have to make fun of me.
Whatever works.
Oh. Yeah. Wow, I don't even have to ask that question. You guys pretty much covered it. Talk about. I want to hear about some of the previous games that you guys actually worked on before Breakpoint, and like maybe we can use some of that to talk about the game when we kind of move toward that area. What are some of the games that you worked on previously? Because I didn't actually see anything online about some of those, or at least not off the top of my head. I don't think I remember.
Yeah. It requires a little bit of digging.
Yeah, definitely. I can just sort of list some off. Let me know if I miss any, Nick.
Sure, yeah.
So I think the first game we made was a lo-fi horror game set in a space station. So that was a game jam game. Made it in 48 hours, and then polished it up afterward. Man, I'm not going to get these right in chronological order, so I'm just going to start listing them off. So there was Rift Core, which was a real-time strategy game where you control 3 mechs, and it's sort of chapter-based. You have 11 or 12 maps you have to get through in increasing difficulty. Your mechs start warping, like they absorb this dark energy and then like fuse the man in the mech, and they become this monstrosity, and you have to like control that.
It was like our first kind of like real story-oriented, kind of writing-oriented game.
Right.
A lot of the other games that we made prior were not really.
Yeah, not at all.
Dialogue or story-oriented. So that was the one that we wanted to put a little bit more energy into.
characters.
into developing a bit of the character and into a little bit of the lore. It taught us a lot about our process and a lot of what did not work for us.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So after, let's see, there is a 1-bit survival game that we did. Sort of, if you guys know Minute, it's like only black and white.
Looks like that, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Neat.
She would know that better than me.
So yeah, so it's only black and white. It's like any traditional survival game. You start out punching trees and gathering wood, and then
any good survival game starts out.
Right. And then you work your way up this tech tree. That one was also a jam, but that one was 72 hours. We did, for 6 months, we made a prototype game called Obelisk that is a top-down isometric action game.
It's a roguelike.
Sort of like Hades, if you guys have played that.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I've seen gameplay for it, so yeah, I know what you're talking about. Yeah.
It's just like a melee-oriented Enter the Gungeon, basically.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Okay, yeah, that's actually a decent way to describe it, right?
Nice.
You have loot drops, you go around in a top-down world, you attack enemies, they're procedurally generated world and enemies, and you just try to get better loot. That's basically it.
Okay.
And then I'm almost certain there's one I'm missing, but I can't remember what it is.
Drift Trousers, whatever we call that.
Sky Drifter. That's definitely one. Yeah, we did that for the most recent Game Maker's Toolkit Jam.
Yeah, cool. It's like Lift Trousers. Basically, you just fly around and you have sort of like a. It's hard to describe if you're not familiar with Lift Trousers, but basically it's a side-scrolling ship combat game where you
2D dogfighting.
Yeah, 2D dogfighting.
Right.
The only real big departure in the way that game controls is that you accrue energy, and then once your energy goes overload, you kind of go berserk. You shoot bullets all over the place, and you go super fast. So it just gives you this moment, this short burst of empowerment where you just become overloaded and you can destroy everything on the screen. You're basically invincible, and then afterwards you have to kind of play it normally.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Yeah.
I'd actually say that of those, probably, I think Dead Signal, the lo-fi horror game that we made, was probably our first, and probably still, apart from
our most popular.
Still our probably most popular, because it's on itch, and that what Vinesauce and Markiplier played it.
Yeah.
Really?
Oh.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was
That must have been really exciting.
We didn't send it to Markiplier, and he just put it as part of a horror game
3-game horror compilation.
Horror compilation.
Oh, okay.
And it was
I'll
actually
have to check those out.
yeah, it was pretty funny watching him kind of react, and essentially as a game where there's this part, I won't really spoil it, but we kind of we turn the tables on the player in a weird moment, and he in his very Markiplier way at the end of he's like, I like that. But F you for doing it. And I was like, you know what? You're talking to me. You're literally looking into the camera and you're talking to me as the developer. That's kind of awesome.
That's funny. That's really cool. Wow. Yeah, man. Just thinking about that, that must have been really exciting for actually both of you.
Definitely.
How did you feel? We know how you feel about that. You're like, man, you're talking to me, Markiplier. Man, that feels awesome. Good. How did you feel, Ed? When you saw that stuff on YouTube, I want to hear what was your first impression when you saw that Markiplier was playing your game?
Yeah, gosh, I can't say that I watch Markiplier or anything like that, but I know. Even I who doesn't really watch YouTube knew tangentially in Markiplier, just he's some big YouTuber.
Yeah.
So when I saw that, it was the first time a game of mine had gotten any big exposure. So it really was just wow, this is happening. I can actually make a game that people want to play.
Yeah.
So it's a really good moment.
Oh yeah.
It's really awesome. I'm glad to hear that.
I actually have a question. Out of all the games that you guys have made together, which one is your favorite? Probably out of all of them.
I have to say, there's a couple of axes to that question, I think. Because
depends on what you're answering exactly.
Yeah, but I guess in the just soft favorite, I think I probably still have to say Obelisk, the 6-month prototype game, just because it was we showed that off a couple of times. Again, it was a prototype, so we never like shared it around publicly.
That's okay.
But when we showed it off, I think it was really, really cool to just see people pick it up without any prompting from me, and then just play it for like, this is a roguelite, and they played it for just several runs, like without me saying anything, and they were having a blast, and it was really cool to see that.
They would really come back to it. I think that was one of the cool things about it. It was that unprompted, people would come back, not knowing anything about us or our team or anything. People would we showed it off at a there was like a PAX tangential, like
right.
What was
it? Was just like in a
forest. It was called Indie Forest, which was basically just a gathering in a bar for a bunch of indie developers, and they would show off their game prototypes and things like that. And so we showed it off there, and just like several people would just like go up. They would ask what it is, but then some people would just like go up and play. Like I went to grab some whiskey, and this guy was like going. I think Ed was talking to somebody else, and this guy he just went up and started playing, and then he just played it for a while. Like he went through several runs. Didn't ask any questions. You could tell he was enjoying himself though, because he was thinking about what he was doing. He was like reacting to the things that was happening. Another guy later was like super excited to share this with his friend. He was he actually like dragged one of his friends over. He dragged one of his friends at the end of the event. He was like, check this out. This is really cool.
I mean, you could tell he was inebriated, but still, like, even without that, still.
I'll take what I can get.
Right. Yeah. Drunk or not, we'll take the compliment.
Right, exactly. Yeah, we had a guy who does like trailers. He came up and he was just like, I know you guys are gonna be like swamped after this, but if you guys want a trailer, here's my card. And it was sort of validating to hear that he had enough confidence in what he was saying to believe that we would get swamped with requests for trailers or people who, like, we didn't have any need or want for people who would want to work on a game that looked to what in his eyes looked good enough to start promoting. Like, we were nowhere near close to promoting that thing. It was pre-alpha for sure.
Yeah.
But he saw quality and value in it already at that state, and that's kind of where I saw like that's cool to actually see people respond to this in such a positive way.
Yeah. And to head off the inevitable question, we may still return to it, but we decided it was a little bit more than we could finish at the time. So that's why we ended up working on Breakpoint instead.
Oh.
Right.
Yeah. One of the reasons why. Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Right.
If I weren't answering that question, if I were excluding Breakpoint, because I actually think Breakpoint was a success in a lot of ways, but because it's so close to me right now, it's a little hard to answer that within the spectrum of like how, because I can't see it retroactively necessarily. It's too close. But I can say I think just from a happening to work together and I liked the process kind of perspective, I liked our first game, Dead Signal, actually, because it happened to be just one of those things where it was the first project that Ed and I had worked together pretty much at all. Ed and I had not worked together prior. I just seen his work, and I was doing my own project. It was sort of just like a regular 2D side-scrolling kind of like teach yourself Unity kind of project. And while it had like decent art, because I was more of an artist, like you would fall through the platforms and do all sorts of weird business that have no business doing in a platformer. So like, I'm not a programmer. I know how to program somewhat, and I understand the concepts of it. I think that's important to be able to do if you're going to be in a project where you need to be a generalist. But I was like, the project was so slow. The going was so slow for me, and so when we'd worked on Dead Signal, it really was like we had planned for the way that we worked together to come together in a kind of a logical way, but I couldn't anticipate that it would come together in such a good way. And for it to come out with such a project that resonated with people, I think one of the biggest successes with it was that what we set out to do, we did very well. That's what I like about it, was that it's exactly what other people see in the project. Like, you can enjoy making a project, but if other people don't enjoy the same aspects of it, you can kind of feel disconnected with what people enjoy about your work, and maybe people can kind of become disenfranchised with making work if they're not necessarily sure people are seeing the quality that you see in it. But we really liked the aspects that people liked in it, and that's what I like about it, was that we definitely set out to make like a disorienting horror game in space that is much more atmospheric based than it is about like heavy mechanics or story or progression or anything like that. And that's what hit home with a lot of players. And to align with the player base so well on our goals was something that I felt was a big success for us, and to do it within a majority of the 48 hours that we set out for it.
That's really cool. So I've noticed so far, every time that you guys have, both of you, noticed the most excitement, obviously, is whenever mentioning seeing people play the game and their reactions to it. And it seems like no matter what it is, every time that you talk about it, you have a bigger smile on your face when you mention these people that you saw playing the game, and they were excited, they were enjoying themselves. So would you say it's fair to say that you get a great deal of satisfaction out of the fact that you are creating something that others can connect with and get enjoyment out of? So that's a huge part of it for you emotionally.
Oh, yeah. In fact, I think that's, like, when people ask me why I create games, I think that's why. Is I want to see people like play it and not only tell me that I did a good job, but also just like enjoy themselves. That's the entire reason.
Yeah,
really cool.
I'd agree for the most part. I think art is a communication. I don't know necessarily everybody will agree. I think some people will say that art is kind of a reaction,
An expression of yourself.
Yeah, it's an expression of yourself. And that it's just sort of like I eat, I breathe, I art. You know, like it's just sort of a thing that you just do, and if people like it, you know, screw them. If they don't like it, whatever. I'm kind of not necessarily of that mindset. I think art is a communication, and it doesn't have to be mutually exclusive. But I try really hard to understand what people are taking away from art that I'm making and what other people make in art. And for me, art being an expression and a communication is such a big deal that, you know, I'm not heavily dependent on other people's reception of my work, but I do enjoy it when people do see in art what I'm trying to express.
That's really cool. Nice. So I don't know if you actually were you getting audio whenever I would say that was really cool? Did you hear that first part or no? Because like it doesn't seem to be okay. Yeah, it doesn't seem to pick us up every time.
Yeah, it seems fine.
Okay. So So for you, it's a lot of it is the art aspect, people seeing what you're trying to portray, you communicating with them through the art, which that's actually something that's very that's mentioned a lot whenever you mention one would mention the colors and the lighting effects in something, let's say a classic movie like Casablanca, right? They talk for eons about the lighting and how
classical academic art.
Yeah, exactly. And it's just, you are portraying something, and you're portraying an emotion, you're portraying some kind of scene that you want people to feel about, and when you communicate through that, that's something special. Yeah, I totally agree. That's really cool. Awesome. 1 second. Let's see. So I wanted to ask next. How did the idea of Breakpoint come about? Like, what exactly was it? I'm gonna aim this toward Ed because he's been talking less. Ed, like, what came about? Like, what happened? Like, was it just slow going? You kind of like were like, oh, this would be a neat idea, and you kind of just built it over time. What?
So as we mentioned, it came from a game jam, and the theme for that game jam was intentionally broken. Okay. So when we were ideating on this, we were like, okay, you know, it's not enough to just be like, oh yeah, like you want to throw vases at people or something. Like, you know, there's a lot of ways you could take that, but what we really wanted a game where the player like felt awesome when they were doing whatever action they were doing that was intentionally breaking. So I remember like you know, we were ideating on things like whatever, breaking vases or whatever else. And then Nick had mentioned like, oh, there's this game. I can't remember exactly what game it was, but I'm sure Nick remembers that where you like break your weapon, like as a samurai, you know, you're in that phase where like you're looking at the other samurai and you're both like hands on swords, and then you know, you take your weapon out and then your weapon
on the screen.
Yeah, like slashes everybody on the screen.
So when you're
and
switching
like,
weapons in Muramasa the Demon Blade.
Yeah.
When you're switching your weapon is charged just like hits everybody. It's this big event.
Yeah, so the idea was like, what if it was that, except like you did the thing where you draw your weapon out and then it just like shatters into 1,000 shards and the shards all explode into like all of the enemies on screen.
That would be cool.
So that was like the origin for the main mechanic in Breakpoint, where your weapon explodes and then you take out like 100 of the green guys on screen.
Right.
From that seed, we just built up the rest of the game. Like, it wasn't even obvious to us, at least at the start, that it was going to be shapes and neon colors. That just sort of evolved naturally through the game jam's constraints, where we were like, what can we do in a game jam in 48 hours that looks good? One of the obvious things you might want to do in a top-down perspective is something like Hotline Miami, where it's just like, you know, from the top down, you just have their head and then your shoulders.
Just didn't want anything to look that bloody, man.
Yeah.
Bloody.
Yeah, Nick really didn't want to do that. So we're like, yeah, let's, you know, maybe a better art style would be Geometry Wars, where it's it's simple to pull off. We sort of already had the tech skills we needed to do like the neon aesthetic, just because of previous projects we did, like we knew. So yeah, I mean, it really just evolved naturally from there. At the end of the game jam, we had something that looked somewhat similar to the game we have today. We were actually on Wednesday night, just before the game released, we were looking through all of our old builds. And you can definitely tell it's the same game, but man, is it like way slower and like way worse looking.
It's got the same DNA. It's obviously related, but it's
right. So from there, it was just like all a refinement process. Just made it look better. Just iterated and iterated and iterated on the mechanics and the art style until we got to the game we have today.
That's really awesome. It's really cool. You guys, so that's, what was I thinking? I was literally about to say something and then I lost it. I'm sorry. Let's see.
I don't know if you have anything else to say to that, Nick.
as far as like how we made
Breakpoint, right. Or like how you came up with the idea.
I mean, it's a collaborative process. Like any.
Oh, we came up with the idea.
Yeah, we came up with the idea. It was just a group. It's a group effort. Ed and I had done jams prior, so we have sort of a process. I usually talk about, like in the beginning, I suggest to us to like break apart for like 15 minutes, kind of come up with our own ideas, see what kind of like thoughts we have. And one of the things that I usually talk about or think about during that 15 minutes is I think about ways to interpret the theme and what we're likely to see in as other jam entrants. So we're going to see a lot of games where the game is intentionally broken, but I didn't want to do that because that makes the game generally unfun. Broken games are funny in concept, but not necessarily fun to play. We were going to see a lot of games where like you just are literally breaking things not too far from what we were doing. Basically, when you're breaking down like what you're going to see and what you're likely to pursue, it's just a matter of asking like, how excited are we to pursue these ideas? Where can we extrapolate how good these ideas can get? And where can we see these ideas becoming unique, and whether or not we'd like to pursue them is going to be dependent upon like a lot of these factors. Like, do we like what we're making? Can we come up with cool ideas?
Right.
What kind of analogs can we draw? Like one of the early analogs for Breakpoint, apart from Muramasa, for example. Like Muramasa wasn't even like necessarily the only real game that we were drawing parallels to. I think probably the biggest one that I know Ed is not necessarily saying, but is quite aware of, is the fact that like our break mechanic is very close to the break mechanic in Breath of the Wild. When you break a weapon, your durability in Breath of the Wild, you sort of explode the weapon to keep you safe. And I was familiar with that. But the way that break works in that game is it's mostly for a safety parameter. It's like it's there to push enemies away, but it's not necessarily used to kill enemies. It does more damage, but you don't want to be using that as a primary form of attacking enemies, because then you just run out of weapons. In our game, you actually just do that all the time, because we wanted, like one of the things that I wanted to say early on was I was like, it's not enough just to make it so that things just break in the game. That's not like when you have a theme that says intentionally broken, that is one way to interpret it. But not only do we want to have it in the game, I want it to be awesome. I want it to be like it. I want that to just not just be there, but feel good to do. Like it should be awesome to do. So let's make it so that, because in the beginning, for example, hitting enemies was the primary way you'd attack them and destroy them, and just blowing up was just this kind of side thing that happened. And then later on, I was like, no, just, you know what? This is not working. This doesn't feel as good as it should. Let's just make it so that hitting does work to a certain degree, but you are mostly hitting to achieve the break rather than the other way around.
Yeah.
Like your break is your primary way of destroying enemies, so that we focus on making that feel good, so that people understand that that's what the core of the game flow should revolve around as a player.
So it seemed like as I was playing, I played a little bit, just get all the sounds and stuff situated, and I was like, what's that?
So you get familiar with it.
Yeah, so to get familiar with it. Probably should have done that with Kyle's game. I was like, oh man, I really should have thought this through.
I don't know. With Kyle's game though, I feel like that honestly made that better because, you know, we didn't know what to do on that level. We couldn't have had everything memorized,
more
that
genuine,
kind of thing.
I mean,
genuine response.
Yeah. At the same time, though, then we didn't get to show off some really cool things about the game. But you know, but you know, it's whatever. It's in the past. People will get to see it, and people know Kyle now. That's the important part, and they're getting to know you guys now. What I noticed is it seemed like there's a certain number of times that you hit the enemies, and then it will break, right? So you can actually plan that out. Right. So you can plan when to break it, like group stuff up so it will hit as many as possible, kind of thing.
Right.
So, who came up with that initially? Like, who decided on that little factor? Like, maybe it should be like number of times you hit it, and then that way you can plan it out or like feel good about that last hit, getting them or.
Pretty sure it was Nick.
Yeah,
but
generally when we break apart into the design, despite the fact that like we are very collaborative with our design, generally I'll be like kind of heading that, just because like from the team's perspective, I'm usually the artist / designer. But then, you know, that doesn't change the fact that like a lot of it's very team oriented. We contribute a lot of ideas through the team. But I think that one was probably, I mean, early on the game was a little different. We had it was odd because the way that the game worked was when you hit enemies, sometimes they would drop a weapon and you had this ability to pick up their weapons, and you had this inventory you could cycle through, and then your weapons would break, and when they were broken, you just had a stick, like a broken stick to attack with. And you had to merge your broken weapons together in order to create a stronger merged weapon, which was cool and interesting. You had like sword lance or not sword lance. You had like lance,
hammer sword,
axe, and hammer sword, or hammer axe, and stuff like that. You just had like weird, like a hammer would swing and then you would stab them with a lance, and it was just some weird like combination of things. And really, we just wanted to get through the idea of like, you have these weapons and you're trying to break them, and just the breaking is like cool. You have these big explosions and the shrapnel of everything would just like fly out. And it was like, not only mechanically the thing you should be doing, but also just visually really arresting. Like it's very visually compelling to go through. So I think in general, it wasn't necessarily like, because I think early on, like I'd said, we were hitting the enemies too much, and it became more just about like a very traditional, you hit the guys and then you destroy them when you hit them. We had to break it down into it is a numbered amount you hit them, and it needs to be a small amount to hit them. Obviously it gets larger, the amount that you can hit them when you have a higher tier weapon, but it's like we were never that deliberate necessarily about the number of hits that it would take to hit an enemy. Actually, I'm almost never very like numbers oriented myself. What happens a lot of the time is I have a thing that I want to do or an idea that I think is good for us to pursue, and I'll ask Ed about a way that we might want to implement that, and he'll help implement a tool for us to tweak those designs and then I will just play with those numbers like a dial, just until it feels good. And then once like I kind of have run all of the essential simulations in my head about like what kind of situations you can run into, I will tweak those numbers until both it feels good and theoretically we shouldn't be running into any problems. And then we'll just give it to people to see whether or not that's true.
Okay.
So, as soon as you guys start talking about this, you're talking about the mechanic, and it seems like you're very, very focused on making it more enjoyable and more of an enjoyable experience, both visibly as well as technically on both sides. So that's another. It kind of keeps on going. So yeah, I feel like we're getting to know exactly what kind of developers you are. you genuinely love to create something that you can see the expression on people's face. You see that they're enjoying it, and it's something unique, something that they didn't get somewhere else, right? They couldn't get somewhere else just from a typical fighter game or whatever. And in this one, there's something really satisfying about when something when your weapon breaks, or both visually and, like I said, technically, and audibly too. If I noticed, it was actually pretty intense when I played. It was quite the explosion. So that's cool. So let's getting down to it. So I'm happy about that. That's good. Nick, I believe I didn't get to ask you the question. What was your first most loved video game? I know that you've talked about the video games you've played, but what would you say was one that really hit home for you in your youth?
Chrono Trigger.
Chrono Trigger.
It's like the one that's probably like my one easy, like, when people ask, when you're in like gamer circles, people ask what's your favorite game of all time, like you just kind of have to prepare an answer. That's not a hard, like I learned to think about what's relevant to me at a time, but the most consistent thing that always came back was Chrono Trigger. Despite the fact that we make generally, like Ed and I have, the games that we've made are generally action oriented games, and we like visceral combat or combat designs in games. Chrono Trigger, one of the reasons why I like that is because in my youth I played a lot of JRPGs and slower paced games. I felt like when I was young that I wanted to take part in making games that were more story oriented, dialogue oriented, plot oriented. That obviously didn't end up coming true. It's not like it can't come true in the future, but it's just not where I gravitated towards. Chrono Trigger is one of those games that I like returning to because it teaches me a lot each time. It teaches me a lot generally about the things that I really value, which is like how to shift a genre away from its general bearings into something that, in my opinion, was more enjoyable. One of the things that I like that it does is it creates spacing in the JRPG combat system. Where the enemies move is actually relevant to you. It's one of the earliest games to do that. Despite the fact that you don't actually choose your position on the battlefield, you see where enemies are in position, and then when you attack the enemy, your attacks can affect more than one enemy at once based upon where they are on the battlefield. So their spacing matters, your timing matters, because it's an action time battle system despite the fact that it's still turn-based. I like that it has very character-oriented small side stories. They're very personal. This will sound very blasphemous, but I actually enjoy Majora's Mask more than I do Ocarina of Time for that reason. It's more personal.
Yeah. I don't hear that too often, so it makes me happy.
Yeah, it's just more personal side stories. I like the smaller scale stories that are more personal. I feel like Ocarina of Time is a very safe, but very like epic, gallant adventure. I think that's what makes it really appealing to a lot of people. Also, it was the first of its kind, like a really big epic sweeping journey on N64, and I respect that heritage. But as a sequel, Majora's Mask is very bold, very brave, and I like it for what it does. It's just very different in a lot of ways, and just really a lot more dark, which I thought was really interesting. And like I said, just touching on that brave aspect, it's very bold to make a Zelda around that aspect. So I liked that aspect of smaller scale stories, very character oriented stories. It's the reason why I liked Terranigma, for example, following afterwards too. They have little stories that you just run into with the characters that you run into, and I think they say something a little bit more personal because you're actually dealing with just like it's not dealing with some big bad where you have to save a princess or whatever, and not everything you do is in service of that big plot line. It's something. Sometimes you're just dealing with other characters, and sometimes for a moment that other character is the star, and you're just a supporting character in their story. And I think that's really interesting. I think that's more like real life, and I feel like I like those stories more because I can relate to those stories more. It's not a bad thing to not always be the center of the universe just because you're the one playing the game. I think it's really interesting to explore times when you're playing a story, but you're sort of observing the actions of what other people are doing and even though it's an NPC, it's a very deliberately written story, and I like the stories that they're written. I like the stories that are written for the character NPCs and the character arcs that they have. So I really liked Chrono Trigger for what it did there.
And Ed, did we ask you the same question we just asked Nick, or?
Oh, I guess I had mentioned Morrowind earlier.
Yeah.
Okay.
Would you actually say that that's the first game you fell in love with, or would you say that that's like have an emotional connection with, or is that just that's really got?
I think so.
Going back
to. It's not my favorite game actually, but it is definitely the first one that I felt that with. But my favorite game is in fact Bastion.
Cool.
Yeah.
For not quite the same reason, but also similar. The story really just resonates with me in that game, and it tells, even though you are sort of the center of attention in that game and you are the hero, it tells a very, very personal focused story about 4 people living in a disaster, and it tells it in such a way that you can learn some life lessons in there. So it's still treasure that game.
That's really cool. Nice. That's awesome. Cool. So if you guys are interested, I was thinking we just got through all those questions. How about we pull up the game and you guys can talk about some things as we come up with questions, and
absolutely.
we'll do that.
For certain,
Right?
yeah.
Oh boy. Faith, what are we gonna do? Faith, what are we gonna do?
I don't know what you mean.
What are we gonna do?
There we go.
There we go. Let's put that over.
Play a game.
There it is.
That'd be a good
That's what
idea.
we're gonna do.
Let's see, speaker view, and then we will go ahead and set that up, and we will go ahead and pull up Streamlabs and switch it to the game view. There we go. That should be good, except for that. That is not quite what I wanted. This guy can go over here. All right. Perfect. That should do quite well. Did you want to start us off, Faith, and try out the game? Or do you want to watch me play and like?
You go first.
Okay.
So I can kind of, since you said you've already played this, I kind of want to see what,
Oh.
One thing I will suggest is, looks like we're not connected with the controller here.
Yeah, controller didn't connect directly. One sec. There we go. It just wasn't selected.
Gotcha.
One thing I will suggest is to go into extras and start from the intro.
Sure.
Yeah, because that will actually ease you in. It's very short.
Okay.
So this was essentially our tutorial. It's more or less unchanged from the way it was in the jam. And that's there's like this huge fanfare audio-wise. It's like this big explosion that says like you're in Breakpoint basically with a big explosion. But that was actually Ed's idea primarily because he was hooking into one of the things that we really wanted to do was like make everything over the top, and your idea for that was what?
Well, I had played a game that influenced me to do this. It's called Ultra Kill, and it does a sort of a similar thing. But I was just so wowed by like the idea that, an intro is such a simple thing, but it can also be very influential to people's like impression of the game.
So what we really wanted to do there was just kind of like give you the idea of not only the style but the intensity.
Exactly.
Because at the time, we kind of wanted this almost like hokey retro 80s, almost like Kung Fury kind of 80s retro aesthetic, where it's like poking fun at itself at how retro nostalgic it is, but it's also like actually fun to play in a way that like in a way like if you're playing, or I'm sorry, if you're just like sitting back and watching Kung Fury for an afternoon, it's like still kind of fun fanfare for the evening, and I think that's kind of what we were going for initially.
It's like, oh, this is dumb, but actually, it's
but
also
actually
kind of
it's
cool.
also secretly fun, like actually secretly cool.
Right.
Yeah. So that was our initial way of trying to get people into the game. Was we want to show it as if it's like this super intense game, but really it's just like arcadey game.
Yeah.
I really like the design of it, though. I like the look of it, and the audio as well, like the music that goes along while you're playing it. I really like how that sounds as well.
Yeah.
Big
Total.
ups to Colin Vandervoort and Max Szymanski, our audio engineer and our composer. Yeah. We also worked with them at the Jam, and they were very pleasant and awesome to work with. And their design kind of comes through a lot of the time. Like we had suggestions, but they're the audio experts essentially.
Okay.
Super cool. All right, so this is. Do you want to start off from the? No, you probably don't need the tutorial. I think you kind of figured it out. You saw it.
Yeah.
There's not actually too much to the tutorial. Is certainly
This is the direction.
Oh. Okay.
Yeah.
Certainly mostly flavor, but I think the only thing it teaches you is how to move and how to aim, essentially.
Oh my god.
You successfully made it 16 seconds in 59 or 16 seconds. Yeah, it's not bad.
It feels bad, man.
It feels good. It's good.
Yeah, we try to make getting back into the game very fast. You just double tap like A on the score screen to be able to get back in. It had to feel very Super Meat Boy in that way. Obviously, like right back into the action. But it is because we still have to show you the score screen, but we get you back in as fast as we can because it was important for people who like score chasers to be able to say one more. It's easier to get one more because while it's still fresh in your mind, how to do better and how to get better, you want to be able to execute on that. So we want people to be able to get in the game fast so that they can explore and experiment with their ideas.
Right. Cool. So you worked on the vast majority of the visuals on this, right?
That's right.
What was one of the most difficult things that you faced when trying to make these visuals?
That's a good question. A lot of the way that we were exploring the artistic aspect of this game was very organic and was based upon a very strong core idea of what it was going to look like and what kind of attitude we had with the game. The attitude of the game being like neon, smoky, nightclub, cyberpunk, vaporwave kind of stuff, and like retro 80s kind of look. I had mentioned earlier about how because we came up with the idea of having weapons explode and there being a kind of a Hotline Miami like thing to it, because we knew that top-down is going to be something that we could easily do. We didn't. One of the early conversations that we tend to have during jams is what perspective and what gameplay method are we going to take, because obviously that restricts a lot of your project motives and goals as you're going through. So, like first-person Breakpoint will play fundamentally different, for example, than obviously a top-down Breakpoint. Same thing with like a side-scrolling platformer. They'll play fundamentally different. So we just kind of decided gravity was not. It's not. Exploration is not really an aspect of this game. So side-scrolling isn't really. There's no purpose for platforming. First person, there's no real reason for there to be a whole lot of verticality, and so the greatest connection that we could make was, well, obviously, top-down has no real need for. There's no real need for gravity there. It's just a no-nonsense kind of like way of expressing the explosions as the primary gameplay mechanic. And so, what games can we make similar to this? Hotline Miami was one of the suggestions, and when I was exploring that, I just really didn't like the whole look of boxy characters, like that big head, shoulders kind of look. I didn't feel like there was going to be a way to have much expressiveness in both the player and the enemies that you would encounter, and so I didn't really want to make like I had to make a we were kind of thinking about that pretty hard about how to explore what kind of visual design we wanted, and I just had to make a hard pivot away from that. Just be like, I just don't think that we can accomplish this with any semblance of confidence, because I just don't think that I like the idea of creating like a boxy shoulder spaced character. I can't come up with anything that looks attractive to me. And so when I was making the arena, I was like coming up with this kind of techie looking design because it was like fast and easy, and like it was just neon stuff over like a glowing background. I was like, let's just do this. Honestly, let's just make it shapes and be pretty unabashed about the fact that this is like a homage to Geometry Wars and games that this is very much an inspiration by games like Geometry Wars and Waves and things like that. We're like, we wear our inspiration on our sleeve. We are not afraid to say like, yeah, we love these games, and we hope that if you love those games that you'll love this game too. Like,
Right.
We're not afraid to call out our inspirations. Like because I think part of it is that I think we comfortably deviate enough from them. You don't have any melee weapons in Geometry Wars or many other twin stick shooters, so we are able to say like we have our inspirations and we wear it on our sleeve, but also we are our own thing. And so I think early on it was pretty easy to liberate ourselves from the restraint of feeling like we were going to be too close to something like Geometry Wars, and just say like, you know what, let's just go whole hog on this and decide that this is going to be our visual direction, and just kind of settle on that.
Okay.
Going back to the question, I think I can come up with one challenge we ran into, which was we did mention that we wanted the breaks to be explosive and awesome,
Right.
but at the same time, it does become a little bit too distracting if they are too explosive and awesome.
Right.
So, so we did actually have to do some work there to just make it a little bit more clear what's happening there.
Right.
So, for instance, like early on, the explosions would zoom in on you instead of zoom out, because it's just more dramatic if it's like, oh yeah, close-up shot.
Everything is exploding.
Right.
Yeah, but at the same time, actually, the deaths also explode or also zoom in on you. And we just had to make a call there, like because sometimes people were getting confused, like, oh, did I explode my weapon or did I die?
Right.
So now one of the visual cues players use to differentiate that is, oh, the camera zooms out on an explosion and it zooms in on a death.
Right.
Along
and
with
it has a
other
giant
things.
word that says break now.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there's other things like that, right? And then like there's just less elements in the explosion than we had originally because otherwise the bloom, the glowing of all the white stuff would just get way too crazy.
Yeah.
Things like that.
Right.
This game is very over the top in a lot of ways, but we try to do a lot of subtle things to make it less overwhelming.
Right.
Because despite the fact that it is over the top in a lot of aspects, it being overwhelming is a negative aspect. It can still feel overwhelming in a positive way, but that's a fine line to skirt.
Yeah.
We didn't want it to be overwhelming in a way that felt like you couldn't play the game and you couldn't do good at it because you were just too distracted from
Right.
the hit or the bloom or the explosion or whatever. We absolutely needed to make it so that exploding always felt good, and it always looked cool, and it couldn't be a question of like, did they get confused? Did they know what was going on? Can they make a tactical choice about what's happening in the gameplay? Because when we toss them back into, after the slow-mo, when we toss them back into the gameplay, do they know what action they're going to take? We still want this to be essentially a pure arcade game in that aspect. We still want people to feel confident to chase scores and to know that their skill is what essentially dictates how far they can carry themselves through the game.
Right. Cool. So what is one of the most technical things? I wanted to, it's kind of neat to hear about the visuals side, the design side, but I got, I didn't get to ask a lot of those questions with Kyle, because I know Patrick couldn't show up, but what were one of the technical things that you guys had to work on that were like really, really frustrating? Like they were quite a challenge.
There's a couple of them. I think actually the biggest one was the hitboxes on the weapons. just because the weapons move so quickly, like for example, the daggers you were using just swipe so fast across the screen. A lot of the times early on, players would be playing the game and the daggers would just go straight through the enemy they were attacking, like without hitting the enemy.
Because they were moving so fast.
Yeah, because they move so fast. So like one frame it would be, you know, on one side of the enemy, and on the other frame it would be on the other side, so they would just miss it.
Right.
Solving that problem actually took us almost until the end of development, and it's still apparently not completely solved. Apparently with the level 3 axe you can still swing through enemies sometimes if you're like, yeah, if you're moving fast enough or something like that.
Huh.
And you're also rotating the stick at the same time, because you can there's a turn radius that you still can change your character's orientation.
That's the thing, though.
Doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, it does not happen very often now. We managed to mostly solve it.
Yeah.
Well, that's the thing, though. Like, I mean, even whenever you like any game you come out with, like there is always going to be a little problem somewhere. Like whether that's noticeable or not, I feel like there's always just going to be a slight problem. You know.
Yeah,
It's just
definitely.
normal.
Video games are all full of hacks and tricks and smoke and mirrors, so it's definitely the case.
Yeah, we try to iron out a lot of this stuff because we wanted to make sure that the purity of chasing scores didn't feel like it was left up to chance, and that it was like there was something there that we, due to our incompetence, you were not able to do the game that you wanted to do. Like this is our most polished game to date, obviously, because we not only spent the most time on it, because it was very important for us, for the player to feel confident to be able to. Like in less score-oriented games, I might say like it's not as big of a deal if something like that happens, but this is like a very combat. That's all this game is. It's basically just combat and chasing scores. So it needs to feel absolutely pristine for people to have confidence that the design of the game is actually well thought out. I'm actually a little bit surprised you didn't talk about the leaderboard.
Well, I will.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean the other technical challenge. For a while, I was thinking about how to prevent cheating on the leaderboard.
Right.
Because it's so easy for somebody to just be like, oh, let me change a number before it sends the score up. And then now my score is 1 million. Or actually, 1 million is low in this game. 1 billion. But I had some. So for a while, I had some pretty rudimentary cheat detection in, and I was like, I don't feel good about this. People can get past this really easily. So now, actually, what we have is once you get to the leaderboard, if you hit, I think it's X on the Switch.
On the Xbox, well,
I can't remember. It's either X or Y on the Switch. I'm not sure which. It'll bring you to a mode on the leaderboard where you can view anybody's replay. Anybody's high score replay.
I like that.
Yeah. So you can actually just verify yourself, like, oh, is this guy cheating? Because it'd be very hard to reproduce a replay that would give you 1 billion score that looks right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I often I like that about that's something about Beat Saber that I love, is that you can go onto the leaderboards and literally click on any of them and see the replay.
I did not know Beat Saber had that feature.
I don't know if it's on all console versions. I know on at least on PC how I run it. Maybe it's a mod. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. But I believe that it is for all of them that you can do that. It has a little share, almost looks like a share button on the right hand side next to the scores. So that I love that, and I that's why I love stuff like speedrun.com that has like you upload a YouTube video, and you can post your score and everything. I love that kind of stuff. I think it's really cool. So right now it's on the Switch. You can do that. Can you do that here on PC? Can you look at those? Nice.
So this leaderboard is actually cross-platform. It contains both Switch and PC scores, so you can watch anybody's replay, including if you're on the PC, you can watch Switch replays. If you're on the Switch, you can watch PC replay.
Right.
Yep.
Okay, so we'll have to pull up player number 1 on here and see what they did, right?
Definitely, right. I mean, honestly, that is another reason I did it. I wanted that feature because the game I was actually most referencing for this was Devil Daggers. And in Devil Daggers, it's kind of crucial that you can see other players' replays just to get yourself unstuck. Sometimes when you're... What's that?
So it's a learning tool.
Yeah, it's a learning tool, exactly. Because sometimes, in these score attack based games, you're just like, I don't understand like 5 million points. Like, how is that even possible? That's just dumb.
And-
like,
and
this guy
then you-
must have cheated.
And then you watch the guy and you're like, oh, I'm just
I guess
bad.
he did.
Well, not only like I actually feel like it is more of a positive experience than a negative one, because the negative one is when you see that score and you're just like, okay, there's no way.
Yeah.
Yeah, the positive experience is when you watch the replay and you're like, okay, this guy's not actually doing anything like super exceptional. He's just executing a little better than I am, or maybe he's just using this strategy that I'm not. And then when you see that, you're like, oh, actually, okay, let me just go back and try the things he's doing.
Yeah. Yeah, like,
Yeah, we
just
wanted
watching
learning.
this guy play, like, I'm already like, yeah, I'm like running around skiing all over the place when I could just stay in the center, and when they come to me, just get out of
Yeah.
the way and get them all at once. Like, there's a little more patience there.
That's what I was trying to do as well, but I haven't executed it
Sure.
best just yet.
Well, see, that's where it's crucial to understand like why it's useful as a learning tool. Is that you might have the right idea, but unless you actually see it in execution, you might not be sure whether or not it's a good idea, or if it's just your execution that's not on par. So you might like if you're once you pull up a replay and you're watching other people do it, you're like, I knew it, I was right about this. I just needed to do it a little bit better. Or you're like, that wasn't right at all. He's not doing what I thought was a good idea. And you're like, okay, so I guess it's not a good idea to do this, that, or whatever. So you start to learn a little bit about like, maybe it's a good idea to do this, or maybe there are certain circumstances when doing something that might not be intuitive. In general, we try to be as intuitive as possible, but maybe there are times where it's not. For example, you might not always want to break 100% of the time, always as fast as possible, which is kind of an instinct that people have when you first play this game.
Yeah.
Partly because they haven't wrapped their head around the explosion mechanic quite so fully, and once they do, they understand like, oh, okay, I should be saving this explosion until there's a lot of guys clustered together, so I can just corral them together. Either I can hit a bunch of them, the heavier guys who can take a few hits, until they're able to be exploded, or just corral a bunch of the green darts together until I can explode them all at once.
Right.
And you just kind of like build strategies upon your knowledge of the game. So like the replays just help you kind of recalibrate your sense of what is a good idea, what is a good execution, and then also like verify your ideas of what is the right idea and what is a strategy that I should pursue.
Right. So what was that right there? So he had like 3 things. Like, is that like third tier daggers or something like that, or? And then
Yeah.
And then you can. What is it, just a bigger explosion at the end? How did he have the 2 daggers out? I don't understand.
Okay, so there's a couple of things I think that you were seeing. One is that there's 2 attacks. One is on right bumper, which is the one we tell you during the tutorial, and then there's another attack on, right trigger is the one in the tutorial, and then right bumper is another attack. That's a heavy attack.
Oh.
Yeah, and it has a slightly different pattern for every weapon. Like, for example, the daggers do the double swipe you saw.
Yeah.
For the axe, it just does like a slower, bigger arc. And then yeah, for various other weapons, it does other things.
Try that out next time.
Yeah. And then I think the other thing you're seeing is that level up at the bottom right of the screen. If you pick up those little sparkly bits that the enemies drop, you gain levels on your weapon, and that also gives you better arcs. For example, for the axe, it just makes the arc bigger and it makes it longer. But also, yeah, like you were saying, it does give you a bigger explosion. When you
Like
do
what he's
explode
doing
the
right now, he has like a level 3 hammer and he's swinging it all the way around him. So it's like a full tier 3 strong weapon.
Right.
If you explode that, it's gonna basically clear out the entire screen. It's a huge explosion in this
Right.
tier 3 weapon explosion.
How do you decide to so it looks like it's taking a while to explode sometimes. Is it if you hold off using your weapon, does it like recharge the number of uses you have?
So when you level up the weapon, it recharges the bar. It also,
Got it.
at higher levels, it takes more hits to explode.
Right.
That's also another part of it.
I thought that's what you were saying before, but I was like, maybe I'm confused because this looks a lot more intense than I thought. I gotta say, my favorite weapon so far has been either the spear or the daggers. And holy cow, this guy is insane.
Yeah, we get the. I think we get the spear and the daggers a lot as the favorite weapon early on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, yeah,
I
Early
feel
on.
like
so the pros are like, no,
Shouldn't have
it's
said
not.
that.
It's really not the daggers or the spear. Trust me.
They're both. Go
there's
on.
different kinds of early on, right? There's early on in the match, and there's also early on in your gameplay familiarity with the game.
Mhm.
It's true, actually, just in general, early on in the gameplay match, it's just fundamentally easy and good to have. Most weapons are viable in most situations, but slower weapons are harder. So, like a hammer is harder to use in a situation where you're
Right.
bear down upon by like hordes of enemies. One of the reasons why I feel like people gravitate towards the dagger and the spear is because they're very good panic weapons. They're just really fast. Basically, they're kind of the opposite of each other in terms of like style, but they're the same in terms of execution. What I mean by that is the daggers are very short range, but they fire in an arc in front of you, and the spear is very long range, but it fires in a small cone in front of you. So you have to be a lot more precise with aiming that. So it's just one of those things where it's like, the similarity that they have there obviously is that they're both fast, and I think if as a player you're like just trying to play keep away with the enemies, you're just gonna want to feather that trigger and just like hit a bunch of enemies all at once. So a lot of people feel like they're more comfortable having agency over their actions by having more attacks per minute, and so they just like to fire off the trigger constantly rather than kind of learn how to play with the slower weapons a little bit. There are benefits to each of the slower weapons, or basically there are benefits to each of the weapons, but I think dagger and spear appeal to a lot of people because when you're getting familiar with the game, they help you to understand some of the other mechanics of like how enemies come in, what kind of patterns do they have.
Yeah, and it gives you more time in that regard as well.
Exactly.
So because you can have essentially an button. I was gonna say something else.
Essentially, yeah. It's a panic weapon.
Well, it's a panic weapon.
Yeah, it's sort of a panic attack. You're just like, well, not literally panic attack. That's like hell.
No.
It's just a panic swipe, and you're just like keeping the enemy away. And you can obviously use it very tactically, but when you get into a situation where things are really bearing down on you, you can use them in a way that you're like, okay, things are really getting complicated. Let's just like fire off the spear and keep them all off of me, or like swipe the daggers back and forth, and I can feel safe for a minute because it knocks them back.
Yeah, it's kind of cool to see how like. I'm just enjoying watching this. This guy.
It's very impressive.
It's really cool, and it like getting to see like how each of these weapons can be used.
Yeah.
Like how you guys implemented each of them. I'm not entirely sure how the heck this score counter is actually working, but you know, it looks like as long as you don't get hit, your multiplier keeps going up. Correct? You'll keep your multiplier as long as you don't get hit. Is that how that works?
Correct. Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So yeah, you just pick up the multipliers, and then once you get hit, it is pretty punishing. It goes back to 1x.
Right. So that's how he got such a high score, and he didn't have to actually play for that long. If you never get hit the whole time, it can get pretty up there pretty quick.
Yeah, that's exactly it. Because it's not just like a linear curve up. You do start to ramp up a lot near the end of the game.
Yeah, it's quite a bit of a steep incline.
Pretty exponential. Yeah.
It's really cool. Almost makes me want to play it again. So
That's exactly what I
Let's
want.
speed it forward. Let's
Exactly what I
speed it
want.
forward.
Well, that's the thing too, is you see it and you don't think that he's doing anything particularly out of line with what you can do. You're like, well, he's just dodging out of the way and he's just aiming. Well, I can do that.
Right.
It feels very good. It feels very good.
Well, that, and we know for sure, like, it isn't, like, because he cheated or anything. Like,
Yeah,
this is him. So, definitely him.
You'd see him
Holy
close to
cow,
the
look at
wall.
all those enemies. I don't even know what's going on anymore. Holy cow. We're near the end. Oh, there it is. The first hit.
Yeah. Once you take the first step in the, in this kind of situation, you're like, oh, well, there goes all my multiplier.
It can be a pretty demotivating thing. Fortunately, we do spawn a lot of players here at the end. A lot of the enemies start dropping, having our chances.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
I see them popping up all over the place. Yeah, and they're like 2 times and 3 times all over.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
once you get to this point, it's not like it's all over, but so you definitely want to keep going to see like, oh, let me just eke out the last bit I can.
No,
of
yeah.
this.
Yeah.
Just seeing all those little green dudes there at the very end was just like, oh my gosh. Everyone, let's just calm down. Everyone calm down.
yeah, I think. Well, all I can say is if you're watching Dinosaur, you're awesome. Holy cow. Yeah.
I'm sure he gets that a lot. A lot of people pull up his particular example
Yeah.
of playing this game as the paramount. So I'm pretty sure he gets some satisfaction of knowing that replay is probably the one most played on the board.
Right. I don't have any metrics on like what replays people pull up, but I'm sure his is like 100 times more than any other
Right.
one.
Yeah.
He's been at the top of the leaderboard since day one. So.
Oh wow, really? Since day one, like he just played
Did
that much.
anybody jockey for that position at some point? Did anybody upseat him for a while?
Oh yeah, for a little while. That's right.
For a little
Yeah,
while,
sorry.
okay.
He did have to reclaim his position at one point.
But
That's
he
true.
hustled it back. Took it back.
No kidding, I saw the hustle.
Well, I mean, it just tells you guys that he enjoys that much to put that much time into it, so.
Yeah, no
For
kidding.
sure.
So-
It is pretty satisfying to see people return back to the game, especially when, like as a streamer or something like that, they don't have to. They can choose what games they want to play, and they choose to play our game. It's pretty satisfying.
Right.
Yeah. So here I have to ask you now. What place are you guys on the leaderboard?
That's funny. I've been holding off myself. Don't want to brag or anything. But no, actually, I think so. Dinosaurs was actually one of our beta testers.
Okay.
and for a while, we were battling it out. So I think I was second place on the leaderboard on the beta leaderboard. So he's even gotten me beat. And then
What was your
Yeah.
high score?
I think I was at 6 million or something, so higher than he was if it is
Yeah.
now. But
Oh wow.
Yeah, his high score is not even what it is right now. He had a
Right.
higher score back then.
his real high score is
We
9.
had to, yeah. when we had to clear it at one point because the scores we just have to do a bunch of testing, and so the leaderboard has to clear a bunch of testing the bad replays. So he has yet to achieve his previous highest score, and so does Ed. So do I. But obviously.
Yeah, I think you were at like 4 or 3.
Yeah, I was closer to the top a little bit later, but I think right now I'm somewhere between the 10th and 20th place. I think I'm like somewhat like 14th or something like that, maybe a little higher for like later further down the leaderboard right now. People are not popular, more skilled players. But somewhere between there, I think, is where I am right now. We just have less time to actually play the game. We're just kind of just making sure our marking is out, it's pristine, it's actually well represented, doing interviews like this with you guys, and then also just little things like software testing and debugging and stuff like that. So making sure that the game comes out in a clean state.
Right.
Yeah, that's really cool. Wait, oh gosh, it's already 2. If you guys, that went by fast.
Yeah.
I certainly enjoyed talking to you guys, and this
Yeah.
is really, really cool.
It is.
It's out on. You said it's out on Switch. On what all?
Switch and
consoles?
Steam.
Switch and Steam. Okay,
Yeah.
that's awesome. We'll let Faith finish her little run here.
Probably
and
won't
then
take long.
and then we'll
You got it
we'll
this time.
wrap it up.
Yeah, doesn't take long to get good though.
Number 1.
That's right. You're gonna beat Dinosaur.
You already watched how to do it.
Yeah, you got
It's
this.
a matter of internalizing the skills.
Oh my goodness. So,
No. Oh, okay. So
Okay.
that's
Yeah. See, you can get a little bit confusing
still
sometimes,
can
but
be
it's
disorienting.
yeah. But it's one of those things where it's just like, oh, did I explode or did I? Okay, good. I got
Yeah.
it.
Good,
I got it.
right?
I'm still here.
Yeah.
isn't that funny? Like, it seems like every single time that you or at least for me, it does. Whenever it's like it's come down to that last life, it's like so all of a sudden like overdrive kicks on,
Oh, yeah. Second win.
Yeah, absolutely.
For sure.
and
This
you
game
just start
definitely
playing
has that
way
of
better.
doing it. Yeah, this game definitely has that way of doing that to you. It sort of turns on, like wakes up, sort of primal, like, oh, wait, I woke up, like I gotta pay attention. Like
Yeah.
you'll get into a near shave with an enemy, and then you'll realize like, oh, I should have been paying attention. I just need to dodge a little bit, and it makes you kind of like pay attention to what you're doing, just a little bit more, just that little bit more. I think it gets that adrenaline pumping in a way that's really intense but exciting.
Cow.
Great.
Faith is doing so well.
Actually,
Oh,
doing well.
there
Yeah.
it is.
Just
Well,
as soon as I
You
say
gotta
it.
jinx it
What
like
if-
that.
yeah.
You gotta jinx it like that.
Well, I
Well,
definitely did better
sorry,
that time,
I-
though.
sorry, I
so
said
got good on the
That's
time.
my highest score so far.
Yeah, totally.
Congratulations, right on. Here you go.
Hey.
Cool.
For sure.
All right, guys, let's pull this back up, and so we can properly say goodbye to the everybody's. I'm obviously not. My yeah, hello, mouse.
Your mouse
The
is
mouse
dying.
like just decided to disappear on us.
Uh-oh.
There we go. Pull that up. There we go. Oh, let's pull up Zoom. There it is. Oh boy. I gotta figure out a better way to do this. Oh boy.
Oh, what did no screen exit?
I think we actually have it over there, but
There we go.
There we are.
there we are. All right. All right, guys. Anything that you want to share with the world? Tell everybody.
If you have any Twitter like plugs you want to put in, or social media plugs you want to put in.
Sure, I'm on Twitter. I'm ChaosEd0. If you want to come check me out, mostly dev stuff, but you know, it's, that's how it is.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. Nick?
And then on Twitter, I am just at Nick Amleg, just my name.
Very cool.
Just follow us for basically our, I don't know, we don't have too many dumb memes, but
Yeah.
it's usually dev-oriented stuff or just like promotion of the game for now.
Yeah.
I think DevTober will be coming up, so we'll just be doing a lot of like development-oriented kind of posts.
Okay. Well, I mean, we'll still put it in the description in case anyone wants to check it out. So.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
Nick,
of course, if we
Ed-
want to promote, we just want to promote the game.
Yeah, absolutely.
So,
Yeah,
just
everybody
if
check
you wanna
out their
check
game.
out Breakpoint, if score chasing is your thing,
Mhm.
if Geometry Wars is your thing, if you like melee kind of combat, or if just the idea of exploding your weapon sounds cool to you, try to check out Breakpoint. It's pretty cheap. It's on a launch discount right now. It's usually $5, $4.99, but it's right now it's $4, $3.99. So yeah, if it tickles your fancy, at least check it out. And if you're into that sort of thing, give it a go.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well, thanks so much for being with us, Ed, Nick. We appreciate you. Thank you so much for
Thank
stopping
you.
off in our tiny little channel.
Oh yeah.
We're gonna do big things together.
No, absolutely. Yeah, we started off small too. Absolutely, we're still building ourselves up, but it's grassroots is the way to be. Indie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, guys, and thank you to everybody in the stream. Boop, 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 boop. We will have another stream coming up on Monday. Yeah, Monday at 7 p.m. Central Time for anybody that wants to check it out. Some reason Streamlabs is disappearing. There it is. All right, and thanks for all for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.